Hi, and welcome to the 01581. Today, a conversation with our town manager and Senator Michael Moore. Join us. Hi, and welcome back. I'm joined by our regular guest now, Kristi Williams, our town manager. Kristi, welcome.
Thank you.
What do you have for our viewers today?
We've talked about it a couple times, but just wanted to give a little more information about our plans for our waste management, something that I think is a really hot topic in town.
Yes.
We had a great presentation from our Waste Management Exploratory Committee to the Select Board, and they gave recommendations, which was to move forward with a curbside program. Yep. They did give some support for pay-as-you-throw, but there's definitely more investigation to be done there. Yeah. So the board voted, as you know, to accept the recommendations and to ask me to kind of run with it. So that's what we're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks.
Run with the trash. There we go. Yeah. So what are those next steps for our viewers?
Yeah. So we want to. We'll be creating an RFP. We're actually not required to, but we do want to do that and sort of look at all the options. Sure. Waste Management Exploratory Committee appointed you to sit with us and work with us on that, so that's great. Yep. And so we'll also be bringing in Board of Health, DPW, and our finance director to help with that.
And our work is complemented and helped by a grant that our Board of Health applied for, and we received technical assistance from someone who works with DEP and IDEP.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
DEP, who is going to help us and has done many of these RFP before, so we'll gather work from her, and she's great. Actually, so I was at the Environmental Action Fair, sort of representing the committee and answering any questions. There was a lot of interest. I think there's general awareness that the transfer station is closing June 30th, 2024. Lots of questions about that, but also folks really trying to understand the process, because a lot of people think, well, I already have curbside, but they're paying for it privately, but then some people go to the transfer station. So clearly, I saw an opportunity for us to educate, the community going forward, and that's very much part of the process that the committee outlined for the select board as well.
Yeah, I think one of the questions that I got recently, and it hadn't really occurred to me the way that we've been saying it, is Waste Connections closing? Is Harvey's closing down? And the answer is no. The transfer station, as we access it, that's closing. That piece of
that's the right language, right? The residential traditional access drive up, right? Yep.
So I'm trying to do better, because I know that it hasn't come across, and it didn't even occur to me, but something really important. So sure. We are going to, we continue to have a partner in Harvey's for the next year, and we'll see going forward. But related to next steps, we'll create the RFP. We'll get responses back. Waste Management Exploratory Committee continues to work to support that effort, which is great, because they have a lot of knowledge.
Tons.
And so then once we get the responses back, we'll have better understanding of the cost and exactly how that program could be structured to best support the community.
Right. And as I explained to folks, it could be that we sort of do like a phase one, and as an example, it might be that pay-as-you-throw is not part of phase one, but sort of here's how we start, and then there's an opportunity going forward. But lots of things to consider, like different types of waste that aren't your traditional household trash. How are we going to dispose of those? So there's a lot of community interest, and excited that we have a game plan going forward, and it's a pretty accelerated timeline.
Yes.
So.
So hoping that we have any articles might be on the October town meeting. So October's not that far away.
Right. No, it's not. I know we start planning for that. Certainly before the summer. So and then senior needs assessment. Obviously, that's been out. It's available on our website, and we have a session actually coming up that's going to be filmed tonight. Right.
Yeah. So at the senior center, it's at 6:00 tonight, May 16th. And so that's being filmed by Westboro TV. So, look for that if you miss it. But, definitely wanting the community to understand kind of that whole process, how it was done, the value of that report. Because, we think that's going to it's definitely going to be referred to and support a lot of the work that we do going forward.
Yeah, as I read the report, and I know we're going to have a specific segment in the future dedicated just to talk about the assessment, but as I read the report, I was thinking about some of the data coming out of it and how, and sort of our towns work on the library and that project, and how, you know, in retrospect, right, if you have sort of a robust assessment done, how could that maybe have informed that library project? So it's kind of, as we think about kind of servicing our seniors, not just through the Council on Aging and the Senior Center, but as a town as a whole.
Exactly.
You know, how can this inform us? And I know that there will be lots of departments involved as we kind of talk about, you know, what to do and how to implement it.
Yeah.
So good.
Excited.
Well, you've got a busy team, busy office, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next show.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Kristi. Thank you. And we'll be right back with Senator Moore. Thanks. Hi, and welcome back. I'm joined now by my guest, Senator Michael Moore. Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here again.
Yeah.
So, are you getting confused at all with the different shows that you're?
No, well, it is strange
Hosting
because
now.
we do it. This is taped. We're not live, thank God, right?
Yeah.
And so it is kind of like you have to be careful of like, okay, what is today? Let's not talk about dates. So it's interesting. I'm learning, and having lots of fun, and I have great guests. So thank you
Well,
for
so
being
with
here.
all the changes at CNN and Fox now,
Yeah.
maybe there's an opening that they could find
well,
for you.
that's why I have my phone right here in case I get that call.
In case you get the call?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I have to run, you know why.
Well, then you might want to send a demo tape out there now.
Yeah,
and, you
yeah,
know,
I'm sure. Okay, let's talk about real news. Okay, so you guys have been knee-deep in the FY24 budget
Yes.
process.
Yep.
The Senate has presented its budget, House has done theirs, and of course the governor, we had talked about that on our last show, had presented. So what are you most excited about? What do you want to tell the viewers about in the budget?
Well, obviously, I think everyone is always happy when we can increase the Chapter 70 funding,
Yep.
or the UGG, which is the unrestricted general government aid. And also, when we talk about that, that's the per pupil
Yes.
increase that we give to the addition that we give to schools.
Yep.
Some other things that I'm happy about is if you went back to when I chaired the Higher Education Committee, one of the initiatives that I helped implement was the early college funding. And so we've got a big increase in early college funding. So what that does, it allows students to actually attend college while they're in high school.
Excellent.
Some schools, the program allows the colleges to come into the high school,
Okay.
or you can go to the community college or the college and you can take the class there. And what it does help with long-term costs,
Yeah,
because now
sure.
they can take college classes.
Absolutely.
And it reduces the cost later on, and them having to take those classes again and having to pay for the credits.
Sure.
You know, there's always some confusion with the AP.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, advanced
AP's
placement.
advanced
Yep,
placement classes, but we had some additional funding for that too. So I'm happy that we're actually putting more of a focus on that.
And obviously, the students have to, they've got to qualify whatever their criteria
Yes.
is, but that's open to really all students across the Commonwealth. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. And one of the advantages of the early college when we were working with the between higher ed and DESE, Department of Early and Secondary Education, is it allows students who might not think that they can do college work.
Yeah.
They can do college work in high school, and they can, at that point, they say, hey,
Yeah.
this is not beyond my capacity. I have the skills.
Right,
So
right.
it really opens up more chances and opportunities
Yeah.
for kids.
Well, and that savings, long-term savings
Yeah.
is a huge thing.
Yeah.
So speaking of college and education, one of the new elements of the budget this year is the infusion from the Fair Share Act.
Yes. Yep.
So I know you're well versed in this. So there's the Fair Share Amendment was passed as a ballot initiative in November 2022. It levied an additional 4% on income tax on every dollar that an individual earns, over $1 million. We're not going to talk about whether we like it or not. That's
It's already done.
that's
The
gone.
voters have said
The
it.
voters have said
Yep.
it, so we'll leave that there. But there's basically $1 billion from this act kind of coming into the budget process this
Yes.
year.
So basically, when this had gone to the ballot, there were estimates that ranged from $1.2 to $2 billion
Yep.
on what was going to be brought in for tax revenue.
Yep.
So the administration, so the Haley administration, the Senate President's Office, Ways and Means, the Speaker's Office, their Ways and Means, they trying to use a conservative estimate, because we don't really know until we have one full year
Okay, yeah.
to see what's coming.
Good point.
So they're estimating right now $1 billion. as a safe number.
And realistic, conservative
Right.
number, yep.
So so that's the number that they're utilizing.
Okay.
What also is in the budget is, so there's also some confusion too, is that when the first fair share was proposed,
Couple
the
of years
previous
ago. Yeah,
election,
yeah,
it went to court.
Yep.
There was a challenge to it. And the challenge was, part of it was that the Constitution didn't allow the money to be targeted towards, well, it can be targeted, but it couldn't be written into the Constitution that it had to go to education or
Okay.
transportation.
Okay.
So basically, when the ballot went through, so the ballot initiative passed,
Yep.
the purpose or the intent of the money is to be specifically targeted for that.
Yep.
But it just couldn't be worded into
Worded,
there.
I got it,
So,
gotcha.
so what they did is, we've created, and the
A
governor,
separate fund, right?
the governor
Yep.
put it in, the House has put it in, and the Senate has adopted it. So we created an education transportation fund.
Okay,
So the money from the fair share will go into that.
Okay.
So this way everyone can see
Sure.
transparency,
Yep,
where the
great.
money is going.
well, and for our viewers, that's similar to what we do often with an enterprise fund where it's
Yes.
like, it's going there. I mean, different structure, what have
Yep.
you, but again, it's kind of allocated for a specific use purpose.
Right.
so- or-
And everyone wants to make sure there's transparency in the process.
Absolutely.
But the big,
Yeah.
I shouldn't say the big, but one aspect of it that there's been a lot of confusion over, and this is, I'm sure that a lot of cities and towns, there's some dismay over this, is that, when it was being promoted and put on the ballot, it was talked about education, transportation.
Sure.
But when they said education, it did not say Chapter 70.
Right, right.
So a lot of individuals
Right.
in towns have thought,
Well, we're
could
going to
be
get this influx, right?
Yes.
And that's when your office is great about providing me with some notes so I can prepare for our conversation. And so, $500 million going to education.
Yep.
That does not necessarily mean anything
Chapter
tied to
70.
Chapter 70, right? Right.
yeah.
Now there.
So it's actually, so the
Yeah,
viewers,
sorry,
just for the
yes,
viewers,
yep.
Chapter 70 is the formula,
Right.
the money the state reimburses, I shouldn't say reimburses, disperses to the
Yes.
cities and towns for education. It's based on the formula.
Right,
So-
exactly. And yeah, exactly. So you have 500 million, some of it's going to higher ed.
Yep.
Now there is about 100 million that's being allocated to MSBA capital. So when we think we just went through a process building a new elementary school with MSBA funding, that's the failed school. So there is an impact to local municipalities, and we see here some money for early education funding. So definitely some, I don't know, I'll call it trickle down for lack of a better way to say it,
Right.
impact, but it looks like really that 500 million is really sort of for beyond the municipality.
Right, for this fiscal year.
Right.
So we have to clarify that, this fiscal year.
Okay.
Because this money is, just because it's going to these specific line items this year,
Yep.
that does not mean that it has to go to those every year. So just like you're saying,
Yeah.
so the deferred maintenance, that's 125
Yep.
million there for our colleges and universities. But the MSBA capital,
Yep.
some of this money is being spent on, for communities.
Yep.
And actually Westboro may benefit this. So and we had to do some language changes in the budget. Prior to this budget,
Yep.
and again, this is the Senate proposal, it
Yeah.
still has to pass the House and then conference.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Okay,
Right.
Once the municipality signs the agreement with the MSBA, and that includes the reimbursements, it's a lock. There's no
Right.
there's no going back.
Right.
So what the Senate has done, because we had municipalities that signed these agreements with the MSBA for funding,
Okay.
and then we had cost of living kick in.
Yeah.
So the
Yep.
cost for some municipalities went above and beyond what the original terms were.
Sure.
So we are actually have language in the Senate budget to have a look back and to go back and provide additional revenue for those communities that saw a
Okay.
increase
So-
in costs.
So Westboro may see some benefit there depending upon.
depending on when you signed it.
Yep, okay.
If the cost of living of the project,
Yep.
if the inflation affected that,
Okay.
you may get some additional funding to cover those costs.
I'll call Steve Durrett after this and make sure he checks into
Thank
that.
you.
All right, sounds good. So then the other half of that $1 billion is for transportation.
Yes, yep.
And so as I was looking at some of the ways in which that money might be spent, I do see $100 million there for Chapter 90. So that Chapter 90 is really intended for, infrastructure, right? Roads, maintenance, all of that, correct? Is that Chapter 90? I always get...
It is, but I always add the caveat
Yep.
too with that. The municipality has the option to, if you want to purchase equipment for
Correct.
the highway department,
To maintain yep.
those roads.
Yep.
Yeah, so this will be, and Chapter 90 is by a formula disbursement. So there's a standard formula,
Yep.
so it will go out to the community. This extra additional money will go out to the communities
Okay.
in a formula.
That was one of my questions. And this is over and above, or is it, I should say, is the $100 million for Chapter 90 through the
No,
fair
this
share? Is this a kicker over and above, so to speak?
This is above the Chapter 90
Okay.
that we did. And actually, sadly, my understanding, if I could, I want to make sure I'm correct on this, but I think the $200 million that we did for the Chapter 90
Yep.
we do on a yearly basis,
Yep.
I think that's still stuck in conference.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't think
Well,
that's been released yet.
As I recall from our last conversation, we were talking about, at least at the way it was presented initially during our last conversation, was that it was kind of like level funded, maybe slightly increased, but it sounds like
Yes.
it's even in conference at this point.
Well, it
so we
is,
don't
and
know.
yes, it is. So when we say level funded, it was $200 million. There was talk, and there were many of us that would like to see it go up to $300
Yep.
million.
Yeah.
But it's, as of last week,
Yep.
it was stuck in conference.
Okay.
We haven't got the details yet of what's holding it up between the House and the Senate.
Mm.
Now, so also what we do have in here, so what we also, part of that Chapter 90 bond bill,
Okay.
which was above and beyond,
Yep.
it's not, it wasn't part of the Chapter 90 formula. We also did a highway and bridge
Yes.
repair.
Yep.
But we've also got that money in here also.
Yep.
So we've got additional money for this. So the highway and bridge, the state has a small bridge program.
Okay. Yep.
So these are bridges that don't technically fall within the specifications for large bridge
Sure,
repairs.
sure.
So the state, and I can't remember whether it was, I don't remember whether it was Patrick Murray or if it was Baker Polito. At some point, there was a small bridge program that was meant to help city and towns that may have town-owned or municipally
Sure.
owned bridges.
Sure.
To give them some additional resources for that.
Okay.
So that is above and beyond
Okay.
the Chapter 90 money, which years ago would have come out of the Chapter 90.
So the skeptic in me says, if there's $100 million here for transportation in the fair share allocation,
Yep.
and Chapter 90 is still in conference at $200 million,
Yep.
is it possible it could come out of conference lower than $200 million because of this fair share kind of?
Well, by the
I know the word possible is-
Yes. So by the word you use, yes.
Okay.
But in precedent, we have, and I'm going back to when I first got elected.
Oh, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, we've never done under the 200 million.
Okay.
Well, actually, I shouldn't say that, because when I first got elected, it was 100 million.
Okay, yeah.
But we've never done under what the precedent has been. Once we've gone to 200
Okay.
million, we've never done under that.
Okay.
So I would be
So I won't
very
put any money on the table. We won't have a bet here.
Yeah.
But so I'm gonna.
Well, no, actually, I'd put a much.
You-
I'd bet the
Okay.
fact that you're going to get to 200 million.
Okay, all right. We'll
But-
say there's an imaginary $5 there. I owe you
You-
5 if it's, okay, that
Yeah.
sounds good. But speaking of precedent, you said that like with the fair share, this is just this year. This is how it's been, that amount of the fair share that is being conservatively budgeted is for, the subcategories as we've just talked about.
Yep.
What about precedent though? Like what happens based on your experience? I know fair share is new, but
Yeah.
what happens next year? We've already got, $125 million for higher ed deferred maintenance.
Yep.
Does that set the precedent for FY25?
I guess maybe.
Because I don't know the process, but it's easy. I would understand.
Yes and no. I mean,
Yeah.
it does in the fact that it sets the precedent in the fact that we're finally recognizing that, and I think the voter can agree or sympathize when I make the statements that many times government, this is on the state and the local end, we will invest in our infrastructure, and then we don't invest in the maintenance of it.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, lots of conversation about that.
This,
It's called the MBTA.
yes, yeah, a good example. So this is something that you could say, okay, look, we have $1 billion in deferred maintenance. All right. Well, the precedent could be, well, maybe we're going to spend 120 million
Sure.
for 10 years.
Yep.
Or we may come back and say, well, look, rather than 125 million this year, maybe we're going to spend it on additional funding for more MSBA projects.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it does and it doesn't. It
And
really
the categories are obviously their needs there. I get it. Right.
It really
so,
depends on what the line item or the I don't want to say the government sector that's coming in
Sure.
can justify for it.
Yep.
And I do know we had over, now again, going back when I shared higher ed, we had over $1 billion worth of deferred maintenance.
Sure.
So rather than letting some of these buildings deteriorate
Yep.
and
Yep.
then having to build new ones.
Which is way too expensive.
Yeah, and if you look at some of the buildings that we have, a lot of them need to be transitioned over. We have the system needs to bring up has to improve laboratory space.
Sure.
They have to improve. You have to bring more technology in based on
energy efficiency.
efficiency. So
right. No, and we're facing that now. Our viewers are probably familiar with many of the conversations around the Hastings School, and that project and bringing it sort of, for modernizing it, if you will, has just been. The timeline continues to be extended because of the cost of doing it, how you do it, and not that we haven't maintained those buildings, but you get to a point where you have to invest, major changes, heating, cooling, all of that. So.
See, one area that it does set a precedent
Yep.
is if we look at the the 25 million for early education.
Yep. Okay.
There were some who were arguing, who were advocating that, or I should say opposing the fact that they didn't think early education was public higher education.
Yes.
And then there were some that saying it is public education.
Gotcha.
Because it is, even though they're going out to private providers,
Sure.
it's still providing for the general public.
Got it.
So the fact that this is being funded through there,
Yep.
I would argue that this does show the precedent that early ed does fall underneath as far as
public
right.
benefit.
The
if you
public
will.
benefit.
Got it. Okay. Sounds good. So let's see, a couple other, let's see, what else do we want to cover? One, I did see that there's some, in the budget, if the Executive Office of Elder Affairs is, there's some commitment to providing funding for, to keep folks in their communities.
Yep.
So that's good. It's proposed to the Senate bill, just for our viewers, over 300 million. And then another 218 million for home care to help with the ASAPs to provide home care to their elders. So, Senator, as you know, we just we just completed our senior needs assessment, and one of the identifications in there, not surprisingly, is the number of seniors, and that by senior in this definition, I'm saying those 50 plus who are also doing caregiving duties.
Yep.
And that, given the demographic of the baby boomers just going up,
Yes.
the need for, care and community-based care continues to grow. So it's good to see. That'll be interesting to see once the budget is finalized. I'd love to have a little more conversation about that and how, what the benefit is to, at the community level. I think our viewers will be interested in that.
So and this is from elder services to all different aspects of health and human services. Let's go from there. Our service providers and the salaries that they are paid are so low.
Sure,
that
it's not a living wage.
Right, and so it's hard for them to attract. And actually, this is going back to early education. We have the same thing there.
Yep,
We're trying to provide these core services,
Yep.
but the salaries are so low. It's
Sure.
hard to maintain them. When you have people, CNAs or other type of providers,
Yep.
and their employees coming back and saying, look, I can make more money.
Yep.
And this is not a shot at Dunkin' Donuts or
No,
Starbucks.
no.
But if they come back and say,
Yep.
I can make more money working behind the counter at Dunkin' Donuts,
Right.
versus
What is a very
paying
intensive, and not that working in retail
Right.
or restaurants aren't intense, because they very much are, but one-to-one care with a dementia patient or one-to-many care with dementia patients is a very different
Yeah.
calling, but you have to have that calling match, you know, a living wage.
Yeah, and then you look at some of the professions similar to early education. You need a master's degree.
Yeah.
How do you tell someone you're going to go to? You have to go to school to obtain these educational
Right.
requirements, and then pay them maybe $30,000.
Right.
How do you pay off the
Right.
pay off the student loans?
Right.
Which there's another aspect of this of the budget where we've got some. The Senate is proposing in the initial budget. They're proposing free community college.
Yep.
For
Yeah.
similar to what the governor did,
Sure.
25 and older who's out of work for that, and also additional funding to establish pilot programs for overall free community college.
Okay.
So that's a direction that's being discussed also in here,
Okay.
which should hopefully help
Sure.
that segment of people who are trying to get the skills. And the other program is for
Vocational.
for
Sorry.
nursing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yes.
because we have such a shortfall and shortage of nurses.
Huge shortfall. So let's make sure, you know, in future conversations, we talk about some of those once all of this is finalized, I
Do
think.
you want to quickly just go over?
Yeah.
So local aid.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
6.59 billion for Chapter 70.
Yep.
7.8 million to further increase the per pupil minimum aid,
Yep.
which was 30 million. That was now it's, and then unrestricted government aid was 1.27 billion.
Yep.
And charter school reimbursement, 230 million for charter school reimbursement, 97.1 million for regional school transportation reimbursement. So that's when the local school district has to transport a student from that district to another district because the school doesn't provide
Sure.
that education component that student's seeking.
And when our, you know, our superintendent comes to us during budget season, you know, comes to the public and says, you know, talks about her budget, transportation is always a big one.
It's always a big one.
Yep,
It is, yeah.
absolutely. And given the emergency shelter assistance that
Yes.
is taking place here,
Yep.
that becomes even more important as you know, for you know, budgetary impacts here locally. So
Yep.
Yep.
So just a quick
Yeah,
note
go
on
ahead.
that. Did you get the list? I know there was
I
an
did.
issue with, so this is a list of all the communities that are providing emergency
Yes.
housing. So,
yes, and our at one of our last select board meetings, our town manager talked a little bit about that.
Okay.
That we got some additional information. So, just for our viewers, there are about 4,600 emergency and temporary permanent shelter units that are part of the Commonwealth's program. 62 of them are located here in Westboro. 20 of those 62 will be in the Sharp building that you've heard so much about, and the others are being held in like hotels
Right.
and that sort of thing. So one of the questions the select board and the town manager had asked of the delegation and of the state was to clarify kind of Westboro very much willing to do its fair share, you know, to help
But
and
their
assist.
fair share,
Their
not-
fair
not-
share, right. And so
right.
we wanted just to understand, so, you know,
no,
kind of
and that's
the-
understandable.
yeah, so
Yeah.
now we have some numbers here that kind of talk about across all of the towns that are servicing. We're one of 66 unique communities that are, you know, providing this type of service. So it's
Yes.
spread across 66.
Yep.
Yes, there are, 170 something in the Commonwealth? I
Yeah.
forget, but I should know that, but I don't offhand. But it's not just Westboro. So with that, I think that's going to kind of wrap up our segment. So when does everything get wrapped up? What's the
Well,
like,
so the
timeline for
time
the
frame is we are, so I don't have the total number of amendments. I know I personally filed 30.
budget? Yeah. And you filed an earmark too, right? Or there's an earmark, maybe I'm using the wrong word.
Oh,
for-
yes, earmarks for the, so
For the
basically.
senior center
yes.
cameras.
Yes.
Yes.
So, so that is part of one of my 30 amendments.
Okay.
So I have, I think, 6 amendments that I'm targeting for local earmarks.
Okay.
So, and that is one of them.
Yep.
So now the House Rep, Representative Donahue.
Yep.
I think her and Representative Kane.
Yep.
Filed for $40,000 for the mitigation of some weed control on one of the
Oh,
lakes.
probably Lake Chauncey.
I think
Yep.
so. Okay.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
so if we can get this, then hopefully we can supplement
That's
that
great.
with this funding.
Yep.
So 30 amendments filed. We will now. So this week coming up will be the Senate Ways and Means will be meeting with every senator to go over their amendments and find out which ones we are going to be a pain in the neck about that we want.
Wow.
And then they try to come to an agreement with people on those. And then they kind of target, they know starting the week of the 22nd, they're going to have an idea of, okay, what are the issues that are really controversial.
May 22nd.
Yes, May 22nd.
Wow.
So we will debate the budget
Wow.
May 22nd through the 25th.
Okay.
And
Okay.
again, I didn't check on the whole number of,
Yeah.
so we usually average anywhere from 600, 700 amendments.
So when we see you in about a month's time here back on the show,
Yep.
the budget will have
The
been
budget,
finalized?
right, the budget will have been finalized once, again, because the Senate budget will be different from the House budget.
Sure.
It goes to a conference committee.
Yep.
That's where the budget can go. In theory, it was supposed to be done by July 1st.
Okay.
If it's not, we do a 1/12 budget.
Okay, yes,
Which
I
means a
remember that.
per
Yep,
month
yep,
budget.
yep.
But hopefully we'll get it done.
The
Hopefully we'll
numbers
get
are,
it done.
I mean, big money, but the numbers are actually pretty close.
Yeah, you know,
to each
in all,
other.
in all honesty, I really don't, the numbers as far as local aid, the Chapter 70, the per pupil, the UGG, those, or the transportation.
Pretty close.
Yeah, they're pretty close. And those, where you're going to see the bargaining, that's really what it comes down to is we prioritize certain aspects of certain line items for early education.
Sure.
The House has another issue.
Yep, yep.
We,
Sure.
we expand upon the we expand upon the free community college pilots from the governors to other, that's where you're going to see the
Sure.
bargaining come in on.
Would love to be a fly on the wall for
Oh,
that.
yeah, you know, it's.
No, I'm sure it's very interesting.
Yeah.
So thank you for all that you do. Congratulations to your daughter. She's
Oh, thank you.
graduating.
Thank you, yes, yeah.
So you got some celebration to
Yes,
your
yep,
family.
yeah.
And great. Well, we'll see you again in about a month.
Great. Thank
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the 01581. We'll see you next week.